Hello, my name is Simon. Welcome to Why Is That, a free speech platform where we explore big ideas and the controversies of our time. Hello, beloveds, and welcome back to another episode of Why Is That? Dun dun dun. Google sucks at epistemology. Why is that? Now, of course, this show pushes heavily the study of philosophy. So if you're unaware what epistemology is, it's the Greek word meaning knowledge, dealing with what do we know and how do we know it? How does it relate to such concepts as truth, belief, justification? How do we know something? Is something a fact or an opinion? See, you can be as logical as you like, but if you're working with false beliefs, then all logical conclusions based on false information will just be wrong. So, by all means, please, please, please do study logic, but also study the theory of knowledge as well. Now, for years and years, we had in the media people going on about conspiracy theories. And God, those can be fun. You know, good little thought exercises. But unfortunately, a lot of conspiracy theories recently have proven to be true, which is disturbing to no end. Thanks, John Podesta, for being such an idiot. And thank you, WikiLeaks. We owe you one. But after the election of Donald Trump, the media who got the coverage so wrong, all the polls were wrong, all their predictions were wrong, you know, saying Trump didn't have a chance and won in a Trump slide in the Electoral College, the narrative became, no, it wasn't them that was wrong. It was, there's this fake news out there that swayed poor, ignorant voters who just were conned by these terrible, terrible people who were just fake news peddlers, who just incidentally called the election right. And you might be thinking, well, Simon, the US election finished a while ago. Oh no, this stuff is still keeping going. We see companies like Facebook and YouTube and Google are now desperate to filter out so-called fake news, i.e. censor the people who aren't on the left. Well, what's happening on YouTube? I'm sorry, these aren't advertiser-friendly, so we can't monetize your channel. So a lot of professional YouTubers are now having their income threatened. Oh, and by the way, it's Google AdSense. So now they're turning to Patreon and getting direct financial support from their viewers. Which actually, it is about time people put up or shut up. If you like a creative person's work, then support it. Don't be a cheap bastard. Because the work you enjoy might go away, and you think that's a bad thing. But then that's just everyone being like you. So everyone's like you, and something bad happened. Maybe that's cause for self-reflection. Or maybe you don't want to get to that point where you have to reflect on things like that, and you just shell out some money. Seriously, a couple $1 a month doesn't hurt. And you might be thinking, Simon, who do you support? I've got my own damn show to pay for. I'm one of those creative people you should be supporting. But anyway, Google, which is everyone's favorite evil corporation. And to be honest, it is actually everyone's favorite evil corporation. I mean, most people use Google. And now they're seeking to purge the heretic, to see who shouldn't show up in web searches and who's advertiser-friendly or not with Google AdSense. Because Google owns YouTube, if you didn't know that. So with last week, I'll let Sargon of Akkad rant, and then I'll rant. Rant a lot. As, you know, I have done my own research on this, but we'll let the masters speak first.
So now that I've got that off my chest, I'm going to talk about something that's actually important. Google's new fact check feature, which will be fact checking its own search results. You already know who's going to be doing the fact checking, don't you? That's right, very neutral and unbiased outlets. That's right, Politifact and Snopes. Highly trusted, highly unbiased, totally not agenda-driven organizations at all. I have seen so many Snopes articles that were just total nonsense. I wish I had taken the time to put them all in a spreadsheet so I could display them all for you now. Although I just didn't think about it. I didn't think Snopes would really be taken that seriously by people. But apparently, they're being taken seriously by Google, and God only knows why. I imagine for Google, it's just a lot easier to just offload the burden onto someone else. Yeah, you know what? Your problem. Yeah, if people have a problem, then take it up with Snopes. Not my problem. And do you know what happens when you take things up with Snopes? The answer is not fucking much. This is an article on Forbes where the journalist in question is trying to debunk a Daily Mail breakdown of how awful Snopes is, and he's unable to do so because Snopes is so uncooperative. They say the Daily Mail's article makes a number of claims about the site's principles and organisation, drawing heavily from the proceedings of a contentious divorce between the site's founders and questioning whether the site could possibly act as a trusted and neutral arbiter of the truth. You may remember a few weeks ago when Wikipedia decided that the Daily Mail was not an adequate source for their website. The Daily Mail is, I'm not joking, that unreliable. If you see an article on there, it really is generally worth corroborating it for yourself. And then he says, thus, when I reached out to David Mickelson, the founder of Snopes, for comment, I fully expected him to respond with a lengthy email in Snopes' trademark point-by-point format, fully refuting each and every one of the claims in the Daily Mail's article and writing the entire article off as fake news. Because if you were being intellectually honest, that's what you'd do, which is why this chap expected it. It was incredible surprise, therefore, that I received David's one-sentence response which read in its entirety, I'd be happy to speak with you, but I can only address some aspects in general because I'm precluded by the terms of a binding settlement agreement from discussing the details of my divorce. Our author says, this absolutely astounded me. He was one of the world's most respected fact-checking organizations, soon to be the ultimate arbiter of truth on Facebook, saying it cannot respond to a fact-checking request because of a secrecy agreement. In short, when someone attempted to fact-check the fact-checker, the response was the equivalent of, it's a secret. And then he says, it's impossible to understate how antithetical this is to the fact-checking world, in which absolute openness and transparency are necessary prerequisites for trust. How can fact-checking organizations like Snopes expect the public to place trust in them when they themselves are called into question, their response is that they can't respond? Guys, how would you feel if I did that? If I said, you know what, I can't, it's a secret, I can't tell you why I can't respond to this response video, why I can't refute this criticism, I just can't tell you, you'll take my word for it, it's wrong, but I just can't tell you why, you wouldn't trust me either, and I wouldn't expect you to. But it continues. When I presented a set of subsequent clarifying questions to David, he provided responses to some and not others. Of particular interest, when pressed about claims by the Daily Mail that at least one Snopes employee has actually run for political office, and this presents at the very least the appearance of potential bias at Snopes fact checks, David responded, it's pretty much a given that anyone who has ever run for or held a political office did so under some form of party affiliation, and then said something critical about their opponents and or other politicians at some point. Does that mean that anyone who has ever run for office is manifestly unsuited to be associated with a fact-checking endeavour in any capacity? Well, it depends who they are and what they're doing, but it just looks bad, David. It looks like you're probably hiring people who have their biases and have run for offices on their biases. When asked for comments on the specific detailed criteria Snopes uses to screen its applicants and decide who to hire as a fact-checker, surprisingly, David demurred, saying only that the site looks for applicants across all fields and skills. He specifically did not provide any detail of any kind regarding the screening process and how Snopes evaluates potential hires. David also did not respond to further emails asking whether, as part of the screening process, Snopes has applicants fact-check a set of articles to evaluate their reasoning and research skills and to gain insight into their thinking process. I wonder why. Even more strangely, despite asking in two separate emails how Snopes assesses its fact-checkers and whether it performs intra- and inter-rater reliability assessments, David responded only that fact-checkers work together collaboratively and did not respond to further requests for more detail, and did not answer whether Snopes uses any sort of assessment scoring or ongoing testing process to assess its fact-checkers. Well, that's comforting. I'm so glad that Google have decided to use them to fact-check all their search results. I know that they can be held accountable. David also did not respond to a request for comment on why Snopes fact-checks rarely mention that they reached out to the authors of the article for being fact-checked to get their side of the story. Indeed, Journalism 101 teaches you that when you write an article presenting someone or something in a negative light, you must give them the opportunity to respond and provide their side of the story. Instead, Snopes typically focuses on the events that being depicted in the article and contacts individuals and entities named in the story, but Snopes fact-checks typically do not mention contacting authors of the articles about those events to see if those reporters claim to have additional corroborating material, perhaps disclose to them off the record. So I just want to point out that, like me, Snopes are not journalists. And I just want to stress that, just in case anyone's curious, I'm not a journalist either. I think it'd be fair to call me an analyst, but I'm certainly not a journalist. In essence, in these cases, Snopes performs fact-checking from afar, rendering judgment on news stories without giving the original reporters the opportunity of comment. That means, by these standards, Google, you could ask me to fact-check your reports. And this was my favourite bit. David did not respond to a request for comment on this or why the site does not have a dedicated appeals page for authors of stories which Snopes has labelled false to contest that label, and he also did not respond to a request to provide further detail on whether Snopes has written formal appeals processes or how it handles such requests. Because let's be fair, they probably fucking don't. They create their narrative, they create their article, and they say, that's it, we're done with this. Refer to this in all future cases, whether the information is right or wrong. Whether there is extra information they simply don't have because they've never tried contacting the journalists and they don't respond to any kind of appeals because there is no process. I tell you what, it pisses me off. And yet I will see journalists and mainstream media outlets using Snopes as if it is some sort of objective, unbiased truth, as if you can be certain. And again, even when I personally have seen articles that I know are bollocks, but I can't spend my whole life debunking what Snopes has tried to debunk and got wrong.
Where Sargon of Akkad's big beef is with Snopes, mine is with Politifact. And bear in mind, the article was just saying organisations like Snopes and Politifact. So they'll include those two, but probably more. But Politifact came to my attention during the 2016 US presidential campaign. And highlighted something for me of a crisis in epistemology. Of course, if you listen to the show, you know I'm very pro-Trump. I kind of want to speak about the Syrian thing tonight, but I thought I'll leave it a little bit to see how things transpire. But I had a friend, well actually I didn't stop talking to the person, but I have a friend who was, and still is, very anti-Trump, and was saying, oh, he's a liar. See, here's this website that does fact-checking called Politifact, and see, they found he was lying. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Okay, let's look into Politifact. Who owned Politifact? This is what I did at the time. Politifact is owned by the Tampa Bay Times, a publication that during the US 2016 election endorsed Hillary Clinton. Completely unbiased. I mean, honest as the day is long. And, oh, God, just going through and fact-checking and pointing out things on the articles I did. But if you want to know more about the Tampa Bay Times, it's owned by the Polniter, I'm probably mispronouncing it, Institute for Media Studies, a non-for-profit journalism school whose most of its funds came from the Tampa Bay Times that it owns. But in 2012, it said there wasn't sufficient income coming in from that to support the institute. So we're searching for other donors. And in 2016, they got a $1 million donation from Craig Newmark. You might not know the name, Craig Newmark, but you've heard of Craigslist, which he founded. Now, $1 million is a generous donation. I'm not too sure if it's as big as the donation he gave to the campaigns for Barack Obama or John Kerry. But, you know, so basically, I think PolitiFact will continue towing the left-wing lines. Craig Newmark was also responsible for the Craigslist Foundation, so not him personally, donating to ProPublica, whose motto is "Journalism in the Public Interest." ProPublica was the brainchild of billionaire and major Democratic donors Herbert and Marion Sandler, and its works published in the New York Times Magazine. So ultimately, with this stuff, it's the left fact-checking the left. I am sure that will do wonders for the cause of epistemology. Of course it's true. It's been fact-checked. Now, just like Twitter's Trust and Safety Council, which I'm sure has nothing to do with their tanking stock price, all these so-called independent specialists aren't independent at all. They're fellow leftists. And both organizations like Twitter and Google have engaged in deceptive practices. Not only has Twitter sought to shut down right-wing accounts of popular right-wing figures, such as like they did with Milo Yiannopoulos. One of the big things on Twitter is that's Donald Trump's main platform. He uses it to bypass the media to go straight to people. Now, they were caught basically censoring the positive replies back to Trump. So it just looked like he was getting all this hate and not so much support. Which is kind of ironic, because even though I like Trump, he is more essentialist figure, or at least could have run as a Democrat easily. He's not the most staunch of right-wingers. And during the US election last year, Google was caught out editing some of its search results. Now, I think the claim was random staff members were screwing with the algorithm. For example, people would type in something like the Clinton body scandal, because a whole lot of people who have pissed off the Clintons have mysteriously died, sort of like taking legal action out against them, etc. And, you know, all these deaths are referred to as the Clinton body scandal. And if you typed it into Google, it would come up with some guy, Clinton's body shop, you know, panel beater. And you'd have to scroll through pages and pages of search results to get to the actual topic. Now, that's just one example, but when corporations end up rigging results like that, it is them trying to control people's way of thinking. And it has an impact. I mean, the New Zealand media is very anti-Trump, and I was watching the news the other week and they were talking about how there was just no evidence of the Obama administration spying on the Trump campaign, where, of course, I'm watching a lot of stuff on YouTube, and, of course, the FISA court, which the Obama administration has to go to, well, the authorities have to go to get wiretapping things. There's records of them, you know, getting it for the for things like Trump Tower, and I mean, it's on record. I mean, you've even got the current Susan Rice scandal, which I'll play the intro to the Right Angle show on the Bill Whittle channel. You can go and see it at billwhittle.com.
2 words: Bombshell. That's right. Susan Rice, a former Barack Obama advisor, was apparently running her own private domestic spying agency right from inside the White House. I'm Steve Green. This is Right Angle with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, brought to you by the paying members of BillWhittle.com. All right, gents, you saw the news. Mike Chernovich, who's been degraded as fake news, broke this thing on Sunday. Eli Lake for Bloomberg, of all places, picked it up on Monday and broke this thing wide open. The short version is all those incidentally intercepted transmissions between members of the Trump administration and the Trump campaign last year. Well, Susan Rice demanded that those identities be unmasked. That's the word for it. It's just illegal as all hell. Bill, CNN is refuting the story that they refused to cover, according to the Federalist. How big is this thing?
Well, I remember reading this morning that that the New York Times and Bloomberg had the story and simply sat on it. Basically just said, no, we're not going to do anything that helps Donald Trump, certainly not anything that makes Obama look bad. We've just watched 8 years of absolute lawlessness on the part of the Obama administration with no hope of anything done because they had the Justice Department. So the question comes down to, Steve, is Donald Trump got the strength and the skin, the thickness of skin, it seems like he might have both, to tell Jeff Sessions to start looking into these things and bring prosecutions against the Clinton Foundation as well.
Of course, you can go to Bill Whittle channel and listen to more about that on YouTube. Two things from that. You better believe, I mean in general, but also I know this happens in New Zealand, that New Zealand media outlets have refused to look into stories or have them and just sit on them. And that there are New Zealand public figures that could go down if these stories were released. But of course, they're sitting on them because they're protecting their friends. The second thing was the mention of Mike Cernovich, who helped break the story and who's derided as fake news. Now, Stefan Molyneux interviewed Mike Cernovich on about his 60 Minutes interview, which many say was a victory for Mike Cernovich, even though, they were trying to paint him some way. Just the way it was edited, ending up playing in Mike's favor. He was saying he just studied up and ran through scenarios of what they could possibly throw at him. And the first thing they came at him with was Hillary's health during the election, saying, well, you can't know it's pneumonia that she had, because he was one of the people that helped break that story. And he said, well, how do you know she didn't have pneumonia? And the reporter said, the campaign told us. That is Hillary Clinton's campaign. And Mike Cernovich just said, why would you trust the Clinton campaign? Oh, and the brilliant thing is he did bring up the word epistemology during the interview. It was fantastic. But yeah, it's just like, okay, so they told you, and that's your, 60 Minutes. That's yep, why would they lie about such a thing? And strangely, during the interview, when they're talking about this, they play the clip of Hillary Clinton collapsing, which was captured on the 9/11 memorial event. Now, for months beforehand, it was deemed a conspiracy theory or would be called fake news. And then you saw a collapse. Now, under what's being proposed now by a whole lot of news agencies and things like Google and that, things like that would just have been swept under the carpet. They didn't think beforehand that things would get traction, but now Trump's in, they're like, we're going to make sure this never ever happens again. I mean, and even the shocking thing is, even if it was pneumonia and not Parkinson's, as a lot of people believed, that is really bad. Because they said, it was going around her campaign office, and that's how she got it. But then people pointing out, well, wait, after her collapse, she came and hugged a child, and she spent time at her daughter's place with the grandchildren, and pneumonia is just terrible for children. It can be quite deadly. And it's like, oh no, it's non-contagious pneumonia. And you know the other type way to get pneumonia that's not actually contagious? If you have Parkinson's, you develop it. You actually had a Parkinson's expert say, from all the footage I've seen of Hillary Clinton, it seems to me like she probably has Parkinson's. Then he was derided as, well, you can't do that. You never had a physical examination of her. You can't say that, they sort of care about epistemological issues then, but then that's somebody who was against them. But all these so-called experts who wanted to do the same thing, remote diagnosis of, they had these psychologists, Trump's a madman, he's a narcissist, he's a this, he's a that. They're fine with that then. It really has to do with biases. And the current move is by corporations for the institutionalization of biases. The internet was once free, and now you're having all these constraints put on it. But to finish off with, it seems Google is an untrustworthy company. From the Independent article, and you might be wondering why the hell am I quoting the Independent? Google accused of systematic underpayment of women workers across the entire company, according to the American Bureau of Labor. Said it found compelling evidence of pay gap. Of course, they mean a gender pay gap. In the article, the department's regional solicitor, General Holt, she said she has received compelling evidence of very significant discrimination against women in the most common positions at Google headquarters. Google strongly denies the claims and criticizes the Department of Labor for not revealing how it collated its data, and said it was the first time the company had heard of such accusations. I wonder how Snopes and Politifact will find on the matter. No, of course, covering the show, the gender wage gap is ridiculous junk economics, which makes no sense. And nobody's even touched the Victoria University study that show that the average New Zealand woman, and this is probably general through Western society, draws $150,000 more in government benefits than she pays in taxes, meaning effectively only men pay taxes. You'd think that would be a big government issue, would you? Somebody should take it to the government. I think that might have to be me. But anyway, I will just finish off by saying those who live by the sword will die by the sword. As with the French Revolution, those people like Robespierre who were responsible for sending so many people to the guillotine ended up losing their head in the guillotine as well. And the more Google goes down this path, the more people will look for alternatives. Just a reminder, you can find past shows on the new planetaudio.org.nz website, and of course, Why Is That radio show on YouTube, where you can listen to past shows. Join me, Simon, and guests, 104.6 FM at 3:15 on Tuesdays for my show, Why Is That? Or anytime online at planetaudio.org.nz/Why Is That? You can also type in Why Is That into YouTube, and it's hosted on the channel Dialectic already.